Hey everyone, my name is Mary and I am a beekeeper. Today I'm going to take you inside this hive right here. So first up, I want to show you where this hive specifically is located. It is actually on top of a roof in the middle of Baltimore, Maryland. So you can see all around here are lots of buildings and houses, and then the bees have access to this really nice park where they can gather pollen and nectar so that they can feed their hive. So first things first, before we get into the hive, we want to make sure we're being safe. So first we're going to put on a veil that will cover our face and make it so that the bees can't get close to our eyes or our mouth. And then the second safety tool we have is called a smoker. So when I squeeze this part of the smoker, you can see lots of smoke comes out of it. And the smoke really just helps calm the bees down, so that way once we're inside their hive, we're not really bothering them at all. This is what the inside of the hive looks like when you're looking at it from above. You have this white box here, and then inside this box are 10 different frames. Each of these slats here is called a frame, and I'm going to use this tool called a hive tool so that I can separate the frames and move things around in the colony. I'll pull up this frame really slowly so we don't disturb the bees. And here you can see lots and lots of bees on this frame. Let's take a closer look. You can see that there's some bees up here that have their heads in these kind of circular shapes. They're actually hexagons because they have 6 sides, but they have their heads in these hexagons, which are called cells. And the cells are made out of wax, and inside the cells, if you look right in here, you can see that it looks kind of wet. And that's where they're storing nectar inside the hive. So nectar is essentially just sugar water, and it's produced by flowers. So bees from this hive will leave, they'll go find flowers, they'll collect nectar from those flowers, and then they'll bring it back and put it in these cells here. Now, the fun part is the bees that have their heads in the cells, like these ones here, those bees are actually blowing bubbles in the nectar. And they're doing that because it actually draws the water out of the nectar. And that's what turns into honey. They're actually creating honey right now out of nectar from those plants. So once the bees have finished blowing bubbles in the nectar, and they've drawn a lot of water out of that nectar, then that nectar has actually become honey. And they will cap over all the honey cells with this really thin sheet of wax. So this whole frame here, except for some of these empty cells, the rest of this is all honey. And if we uncap a little bit of that honey, you'll see the honey come right out, just like that. And then you can eat it straight from the hive, just like that. Okay, the next thing we're going to take a look at is pollen. That's the other thing that bees collect from flowers. Pollen, you can see in here, I move these bees out of the way a little bit just by giving them a little touch. You can see the back of these cells are kind of a yellowish, orangish, they look a little powdery. That's pollen that the bees have collected from the flowers. They've brought back to the hive, and just like with the nectar and the honey, they're storing it in these wax cells. So now I'll just keep removing some frames to see what else we can find. I'll give them a little bit of smoke, just to encourage the bees to go down inside the hive. And notice everything that you do inside of a beehive is really slow and careful. You don't want to move too quickly. You just want to be nice and calm, because that keeps the bees calm as well. You can see here a really nice frame full of bees all hard at work. So this frame has something a little bit different than food on it. This is a frame where the bees are rearing or raising new bees. So if we move some of the bees out of the way a little bit, just give them a light tap, you can see underneath here all of these brown circles. And underneath each one of these circles, there's a baby bee that's developing. So all of the adult bees that are on this frame right now are taking care of all of those baby bees. So right here in the middle of the screen, you can see a bee that is emerging out of one of those cells. So this was a baby bee. It's just become an adult. And just like when a chicken hatches from an egg, the bees sort of hatch into the hive. And they do that by chewing their way through the covering over top of their cell. And you can see that that bee in the middle of the screen there is doing exactly that. She's chewed her way through the cell, and now she's trying to make that opening big enough so that she can actually squeeze out of it and come out into the hive. Now it takes a really long time for them to be able to get out of that cell. So right in the middle of this screen, underneath a bunch of sister bees, is actually a boy bee. Right there. Now, boy bees are called drones. And they look quite a bit different from the girl bees, the workers. They are a little bit bigger. You can see the end of him is a little bit rounder, whereas the other bees are kind of pointed. Now, the one bee that I'm still looking for is the queen bee. The queen bee is actually the mother of all the bees in this colony. So if you can imagine living in a house with tens of thousands of sisters, that's kind of what living in a honeybee colony would be like. There's one mom, she's called the queen, and then there's 10,000, 20,000, sometimes even 30 or 40,000 worker bees inside of a single honeybee hive. So as a beekeeper, when you're looking through the hive, you're always wanting to look to see if you can find the queen, because she's so important to the colony. But sometimes, in all of these bees, it can be really hard to find one queen bee. And that's the case today. I wasn't able to find the queen, but if you look inside some of the cells on this frame, like right in here, you can see what looks like tiny, tiny grains of rice in these 3 cells. Those are actually honeybee eggs. And only the queen bee in the colony lays honeybee eggs. So we know, even though we didn't find the queen, because we found eggs, we know that there's a queen inside this hive. I hope you had a great time exploring the hive with me today here in Baltimore, Maryland, and we'll see you next time.